Hi, I'm Mark O'Brien, writer, director, and star of The Righteous, and you are listening to Contra Zoom.
This is ContraZoom,
where we go back and forth about film.
I'm Dakota Arsenault.
And I'm Rachel Ho.
Today we're taking a break from Oscar talk to talk instead about some awards closer to home for us, and that is the Canadian Screen Awards, which announced the nominees for the 10th edition of their ceremony. For anyone not aware, Canada used to have two different awards, Geminis for television work and Genies for film. Then in 2013, they merged to award one award for all screen work, which includes film, TV, and digital. The Streamline Awards have united the Canadian industry and helps everything make sense under one umbrella. Today we're going to talk about some of the movies that are nominated, which means no TV shows like Kim's Convenience, Transplant, Letterkenny, or Murdoch Mysteries will be talked about today. If you like what we talk about, the Canadian Screen Awards for movies will be handed out on April 8th. We will likely devote some time on a future episode to talk about some of the winners. How are you doing today, Rachel?
Good, thank you. How do you feel about the fact that they put the two together and then just called it the Canadian Screen Awards? Like they went from two really fun, distinct names, and then they just went with a really boring amalgamation name.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like that it's kind of all combined. I always got confused between Geminis and Genies. I couldn't tell the difference before. I have seen I think a Genie Award in person before. I'm forgetting where it was. I was at someone's house, and I was either visiting someone or something like that, and they had one, and so I picked it up. I was like, "Oh, that's kind of cool," because it was the one that was like shaped like the profile of a face, which I probably should have researched what this was, and I'm pretty sure I know who it is, but I'm not going to say it on air. I can tell you afterwards of who I think it was the owner of it.
The profile of the face? I thought that was the Gemini Award.
Maybe that's a Gemini.
Because it's like two thing. Like
that would make sense. That would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I always liked the two. I thought that I understand why they did it, and it does make more sense. Like the Canadian industry, I don't think is big enough to really warrant two. But I did like how they called them like the Genie and the Gemini. Mm-hmm. I always thought that was a fun name, or namesa. But then you put it together and it's just like a really boring Canadian Screen Awards.
They seem to... I think the rationale from them is two things. One, it kind of makes it sound closer to the Oscars because like their website is theacademy.ca. That's the official website for the Canadian Screen Awards. So they're already trying to like invoke a similar prestige group title name that the Oscars have, which is the Academy Awards. And I think also having it sort of together sort of unites everything. And I know like in the past, there's always been they're a TV actor, they're not a movie star sort of thing. And there's like this sort of a class division, which is hilarious. And
especially today. That's funny.
Yeah. And so I think they're trying to eliminate that a little bit. But interestingly enough, the TV portion does not include French work because they have their own French TV awards, but the movies include any language. It could be any language spoken. It doesn't have to be French or English. It could be any number of indigenous languages, not in English, not one of our official languages at all, anything at all. Whereas the television stuff is strictly English language only.
That's quite funny. I didn't realize they did it that way. I mean, it doesn't surprise me that like Quebec would do their own. I guess it's not technically just Quebec because there's parts of Ontario that are they speak French as well. But yeah, that's a little bit surprising that they would do it that way, but not at all at the same time because French Canada is very, I think, like justifiably very precious over their culture. And I don't think that that's necessarily a wrong thing, but they do like to separate themselves from the rest of Canada quite often. That's funny though. I wonder if they'll eventually ever change that, like specifically, maybe not necessarily taking away from the French Canadian TV shows, but because I know like they actually have a good amount of TV over there that's quite good, like specifically to Quebec, which I always found interesting. But I wonder if they'll open it up to like non-English, non-French, like different types of television. But I suppose that would just go with the growth of the TV industry of Canada. Like that would need to come first.
Yeah. I think, like, as we're going to discuss later, you don't really need to have seen a ton of movies in order to see a bulk of the ones that are nominated. And so if you're in the movie side nominating movies, you really probably can get away with watching about 20 movies in a given year and be like, I've seen, the 20 best Canadian films, so to speak. Whereas TV is so different because you'll have miniseries in made-for-TV movies, in one-off specials, in entire seasons and stuff like that. And you're already probably having to spread yourself pretty thin. I imagine the people that vote on things are probably a little more specialized. Like in my other line of work, I am a jury member for the East Coast Music Awards, and I get told what categories I'm voting on. And so I imagine it's sort of the similar thing where it's like, hey, your purview is comedy, so you only have to watch comedy shows. But still, that's a lot to be able to cover. It is
a lot, yeah.
Because, we joke about how the Canadian industry isn't that big, but that's kind of a lie. We've got a whole bunch of channels. They all have to meet a certain requirement of Canadian content produced. And if you start including digital content as well, like it's crazy. There's like 100 different categories in the television series. Like it's crazy the amount if you look up all the different nominations, because it includes stuff like sporting events and news programs and documentaries and and all that sort of stuff. And so like once you start to get real nebulous, like reality competition, reality lifestyle, all that different stuff.
I mean, they could streamline that, I suppose. But this also makes me think about No, this makes me think about, though, like, I can't remember how many years ago this was now, quite a while ago, I think. There was talks about Rogers, Bell, I believe Shaw over on the West Coast. And am I missing any of the big ones? Rogers, Bell,
Telus?
Shaw. Maybe, I don't think Telus was involved in this. Sorry, for cable specifically. And Cineplex. And Cineplex, they were about to come together and to make a Canadian streaming service. And probably, I would assume CBC would have had a big hand in it as well. And they were going to come together and do a streaming service that was meant for Canada. And it was going to, I always thought it was such a good idea because, one, it's maddening having to subscribe to so many different subscription services. So I feel like when you had those big players together, like those big telecoms together, you would get the majority of the licensing shows and movies that you're looking for, especially if you get Cineplex on board. Yeah. Then it fell through because, companies are idiots and whatever. But I always thought if they had done that, I wonder if they would be able to pump out even more Canadian film and more Canadian TV, because if you have like a single source for it, you would get more eyeballs on it and it would be a lot easier to promote it rather than, like we were just talking about Quebec. Like I would love to watch more Quebec television. One, I don't have cable anymore. But two, it's like, I don't even really know where to begin with it sometimes. So if it would have been, I think, a real boon to Canadian film and TV had they gone through with something like that. But obviously we can't have nice things. And so we have to stick with Crave plus all the American stuff, which is slightly annoying.
It sort of reminds me of probably what like Hulu was at the start in the US, because Hulu was a whole bunch of the companies kind of agreeing to like a piecemeal of like, okay, we'll share our shows a little bit.
Yeah. Now it's basically just Disney. Their own.
Yeah.
Well, now it's just cable again, basically, is what we're saying. But that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah. But yeah, normally there are some films that get nominated that will sort of like make you tilt your head and say, I didn't know that was a Canadian film. Like there'll be stuff like The Nest, which starred Jude Law, or The Breadwinner, which was a cartoon saloon movie, which is from Ireland. of recent years that got nominated for Canadian Screen Awards. And I think the closest thing that we have this year is maybe something like The Night of the Kings, which was a movie that was actually submitted by the Ivory Coast for the Oscars for Best International Film last year. And frankly, if it wasn't for French Canadian and Indigenous filmmaking, we wouldn't really have much of an identity for homegrown films at all. What are sort of your thoughts on the state of Canadian cinema?
That's such a shame, isn't it? Because you're right. Like, if it weren't for Indigenous filmmakers, which is slightly ironic in its own sense, and then French Canada, also Canada ironic. Doesn't really have. Yeah, it's true. It's like we just, I suppose, don't really have an identity past that. But I think that also kind of reflects Canada as a nation where there isn't a singular identity. Like, it's not like, people talk about, say, I don't know why I'm thinking of Sweden, but like people think of like Swedish people as like almost like an ethnicity, like a race. Like, and I know that it's not correct to say that, but we are Canada specifically a nationality, not a race. It's not an ethnicity at all. And so I think that kind of reflects that, where it's like you don't really have a singular identity. And I think that, for a lot of the English speaking stuff, when you get big enough, you end up going down to Hollywood and working there, which is, I can't blame people for doing that. I mean, that happens all in every industry. Like, America pays better. So, and there's more access and resources for you to take. So I get that. It is a bit of a shame though, because I think that especially in the comedy realm, like, there's so many great Canadian talents out there, and if they stuck at home, you could just imagine like kind of some of the cool stuff that Canada would be able to call their own for the film industry. Yeah, it's a bit of a shame. Night of the Kings is a funny one. Like, I think I messaged you and being like, why the hell's Night of the Kings on here? And then you kind of like look at it a bit closer and go, oh right, there's like one financing company that is from Canada, and it's I think it's a French Canadian company too, actually.
Which makes sense. Ivory Coast is a French,
because of
former
the
French colony,
connection.
French-speaking country, however you wish to describe Côte d'Ivoire.
Yeah, so it's like it kind of makes it, but it was very weird because I saw Night of the Kings at TIFF in 2019, and I loved it. I think it's a great movie. Yeah, it was an excellent movie, and then I think in the States it got picked up by Neon, and I was like really pumped for it because I thought that's really cool that it got all this, and then like 3 years later, it ends up at the Canadian Screen Awards, which is quite funny.
Yeah. All right. So we'll try to keep this as top level as possible. We've previously talked about several of these films nominated. I think that the easiest way to see a lot of Canadian films is by attending film festivals, where I feel like most of the ones I saw were stuff either at TIFF, at Vancouver International Film Festival, at Sudbury Film Festival, Hot Dog, stuff like that. Canadian Film Festival, yeah, like they're all those ones. If you attend more than like one virtual or in-person film festival, you start to really see the overlap between them, and especially with Canadian films, where a lot of these festivals have a bit of a personal mandate of growing and screening Canadian films. You'll see a lot of repetition between them. So you'll sort of see like, oh, I missed it at this festival, I can catch it at the next one because it's playing there as well, which is nice and helpful. So you can kind of prioritize what you want to watch and be able to watch things that fit your schedule. So it's nice. We're going to stay a little top level. We'll link to our reviews and stuff that we've done in the past in the show notes. That way, if you want to hear us talk about more, read about us talking about these movies more, you can do so. But let's start with Best Motion Picture. The nominees are Drunken Birds, Night of the Kings, Night Raiders, Scarborough, and Wildhood.
Bing, I need you to wake up, please.
What's happening?
It's not safe here anymore. So we're gonna go somewhere where we're safe, okay?
Find your dad. Come on, Laura, hurry up! Not those tapes. Get your clothes.
Only whispers until we get outside, okay?
Sylvie, get Mom's purse. We have to find Johnny's health card.
Let's say something is wrong with Johnny.
Maybe we can find the right supports for him.
Can you really afford to add that to the current challenges that you're dealing with?
I have seen 3 of these, and you have seen 4 of these. The only one neither of us have seen is Drunken Birds. And so I think that's pretty awesome that, between the two of us, we can say we've seen a majority of these movies, and it sort of helps paint the picture of what Canadian film of the last year was.
And it's kind of funny that neither of us saw Drunken Birds, which was the Canadian submission to the Oscars.
Yes.
So, according to the Canadians, that was the best one. And you and I were like, we'll watch the other ones.
Yeah, which is interesting because I personally, I guess it's because if it's submitted to the Oscars, it's for Best International Film, which means it's not in English. So that rules out something like Scarborough. And I believe Wildhood would probably also be disqualified. Both Night Riders and Wildhood would probably be disqualified as well because English is the predominant language in both of those, I believe. So yeah,
I wonder if Wildhood might get in because they do speak in Mi'kmaq a decent
They do,
amount.
but I believe it has to be a percentage, not in
Yeah.
English.
I mean, technically, it's only getting its theatrical release this year, so I don't know.
It might,
who knows?
it
But
might not be
I
eligible,
really, yeah. So, but I really like those movies. I mean, save for Drunken Birds, all four of them, I thought were really good movies. Like they're not just good for Canadian movies. Like they're good movies. Night of the Kings, I already said, I really, really enjoyed it. Probably of the four, I think Wildhood might be my favorite. It's a really good movie. Like it's, you and I were both really positive on it after Sudbury, or Cinefest, sorry. Yeah, Cinefest Sudbury. And we both really enjoyed that one. But Scarborough is also a great, great movie. And they just had their theatrical release on Friday, on the 25th of February. And they actually got to go to Morningside in Scarborough and do a Q&A there, which I thought was really, really cool.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's funny. I've been noticing lots of activity on Twitter about this movie, so every once in a while I'll chime in with a comment, or I linked my article that I made of my favorite Canadian movies of last year, which includes most of these movies that we'll talk about today. And I keep getting like responses from either the directors or the writer, or I noticed that one of the kids' father also retweets me every time I tweet about the movie.
That's adorable. That's so cute.
Yes.
Scarborough's a great movie. I'm so glad it exists and everything.
Yeah.
So
It's definitely a movie.
I love that movie. Yeah.
It's definitely a movie you want to make sure you have a box of tissues nearby because it's going to make you feel a lot of emotions. But it's a great one. And for anyone, I guess we could probably do a little bit of describing some of these movies. Scarborough tells the story of three young children who are growing up in Scarborough. And Scarborough is a neighborhood in Toronto that has one of the highest percentages of immigrants and non-white people living there. So it's a very diverse area with lots of interesting culture. But unfortunately, it's also not really funded very well. So there's a lot of low-income housing, poverty, and a whole bunch of issues that should be more looked after by the various levels of government that is not, unfortunately. And so you've got these three young kids, and each of them kind of trying to come into their own and feel who they are through this breakfast program basically before school, run by a teacher at this school who is putting way more effort, time, resources than her school believes that she should. And we get to see sort of the lives at home and how this program changes the lives for these kids there. Mostly for the positive. Some of them it gets a little tragic, but you get three very precocious and adorable children who you just want to, hug and make sure that they're all nice and safe.
They are very sweet. Yeah, they are very sweet. And you mentioned the kind of the makeup of Scarborough, and I mean, it doesn't have the greatest reputation within the GTA or within, I suppose, Ontario as a whole. And I always thought that was a shame because it's the starting point for a lot of families that are coming to Canada, like new to Canada, my family included. I only know maybe a few people who immigrated to Ontario without living in Scarborough. It's just the place that I guess because one, it's in Toronto, like it's considered Toronto, or at least it is now. It wasn't when I was growing up, but it is now. So it has kind of the links to the city and, generally speaking, you probably have like a cousin or an aunt or an uncle who was living there first, which is why you moved there too. So yeah, I like that there's a movie that, even though it does show a lot of sad bits of it, it does kind of celebrate that part of the GTA. And not like, it doesn't do like a poverty porn thing. It doesn't do anything like that, which I appreciate as well, because I think it more so celebrates the culture that's there. And I think that, is very worthwhile considering the kind of, anytime something bad happens in Scarborough, they always say in the news, they'll say Scarborough. Whenever something good happens, they'll go, the east end of Toronto, this thing happened. So it's very frustrating sometimes when you see things like that. But it's a great movie, and we both really liked it. And we both really liked the performances of the kids, and that's never easy either, having child performers, because it's a bit of a hit or miss, but they're so good. All of them were really, really good.
Yeah. The story centers around a young Filipino boy, a young Indigenous girl, and a young white girl as well, and how their cultures and backgrounds sort of impact who they are and how they're being raised is also a key part of the story that helps inform who they are as people too. Another one we talked about is Wildhood, and that was a movie where I was a big fan of, and I know you liked as well too. It's about this young boy who runs away from his abusive father and takes his younger brother with him. He is half Mi'kmaq, half white, and he is searching for his Mi'kmaq mother. And so along the way, he meets some people who are Mi'kmaq as well, and sort of learned both about his own culture and history, and sort of it's also a coming of age story as well, where he realized that he's two-spirited. And so it's got a whole bunch of this could be just a journey movie. This could just be a coming of age story. This could just be finding your roots story, all this different stuff. But they sort of do all three together to create something really interesting and unique, because more often than not, I really hate coming of age or road trip movies because they're so cliche ridden. And I think for the most part, this movie avoids the cliches by doing something new and unique that we haven't seen before, and taking a lens of what does it mean to learn about your Indigenous history when you've been forcefully told to hide it, basically.
And there's a movie out, or a documentary that I've been talking about, which is Flee, which does something kind of similar in terms of it isn't just, not to say it's just one note, it's only a refugee story. But it incorporates a lot of different aspects to life, which I think just helps, it helps flourish a movie and a story that much better, because it's just more three-dimensional, I suppose. So I really liked how Wildhood mixed all of those, multiple aspects together, as you said. And also, I want to point out the soundtrack for Wildhood is amazing. I really, really like the soundtrack. And they have some really cool needle drops throughout the movie. It's amazing.
Yeah. There's a lot of Jeremy Dutcher, and I'm a big fan of Jeremy Dutcher. But yeah, this is a very interesting one. We'll move on to some of the other categories, and we'll talk about some of the movies as well. Best direction, we've seen 3 of the nominees, and that's the direction for Night Raiders, Wildhood, and Scarborough. You got Danny Goulet for Night Raiders, Bretton Hannum for Wildhood, and Sasha Nakai and Rich Williamson for Scarborough. And so it's nice to see those 3 movies there. The other 2 nominees were Anthony Scott Burns for Come True and Philippe Gregory for The Noise of Engines, which are 2 movies I'm not actually very familiar with.
Me neither, not at all. But yeah, I like that Danny Goulet in particular got a shout out. She's been a name that, if you're kind of into Canadian film, she's been around for a little while as an actress and behind the scenes. I know she worked for TIFF for a while too, actually. So it's really cool to see her getting some recognition for her film.
Yes. And Night Raiders is a movie that I think we both agree that has a really, really interesting concept. This sort of reimagining of residential schools, but in a sci-fi dystopian future. It starts off really strong, and it's got some good performances, but in the end, it kind of is let down by the weight of its own ideas, I guess is the best way to explain it.
Yeah.
It's a decent movie, and I think people will probably enjoy it, but the originality at the beginning doesn't sustain it all the way through, and I don't really know else how to describe it.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because, I know before you went to go watch it, I told you, I was I think it's fine. It's a good movie. I wouldn't ever say it's a bad movie. It's a good movie, but it just feels like there was a missed opportunity somewhere in there. It could have been a great movie. It has the bones to be something really, really amazing. And it just kind of fell short. But it's funny, like, you can't really, I mean, I'm sure you could sit down and like nitpick and really cut up the movie and say exactly why we think it could have, or where we think it could have been improved. But generally speaking, it's like, I can't really put my finger on what it is that I would have been like, oh, this would have been great. It's just, I guess it's just, I mean, it's hard to stick the landing of movies, and something as ambitious and interesting as this, it's like, I don't know, they put in so much work maybe to the front end that it's tough to wrap a movie up like that. But, it's a good movie, like you said. Yeah, but we both just kind of wanted it to be a bit more, I think.
Mm-hmm. I feel like maybe a bit of the issue is there's quite a large MacGuffin in this movie where they're trying to get to a safe zone that may or may not be real. And the main character, they need her to lead a group of recently freed children who have been broken out of this military school, basically, to the safe zone. In exchange, they will help get her daughter out. And then that whole plot line is just kind of dropped and ignored completely by the end. And so it just sort of feels like you spent about half the movie talking about this, and then it just sort of sidetracked at the very end where it's like, oh, that doesn't matter anymore. And so I think that's kind of a bit of an issue for me is you can't really build up something so much just to completely ignore it. Yeah,
that's fair. That's really fair. Like, maybe there's just one too many threads that they're trying to pull together, and eventually something has to kind of give. But you're right, like, something as big as that, you're left feeling, I guess, not satisfied with what the conclusion was. Yeah, it's fair.
But let's move on to some of the acting categories. And I think Best Actor is one that you probably have the most to say about, because you've seen 4 of these and I've only seen 2 of them. So if you want to kind of share your thoughts on the Best Actor category.
Right. So for Best Actor, Rogelio Balatas for Islands is nominated. I apologize, I'm going to mess this pronunciation up, but Pavel Semerich for The White Fortress, Liam Diaz for Scarborough, Philip Lewitsky for Wildhood, and Thomas Anthony Olajide for Learn to Swim. So Scarborough and Wildhood we kind of talked about already. Liam is the little Filipino boy who we both really loved. Is that whose dad is retweeting your stuff?
No, it was not. It was the white girl's dad.
Oh, I thought it would be so cute if it, I don't know. I really, yeah. So Liam Diaz, he plays Bing, and he's he is the lead character in that. It focuses on him and his mom, and he does such a great job, and he is adorable. Like, that does really help that he's just so super cute and has very, very cute cheeks as well. You just want to squish him. But yeah, he really does a great job beyond just being a cute kid. He actually does a really good job in the film. Thomas Anthony Olajide for Learn to Swim. So Learn to Swim is, I would call it like a very vibey movie, if that makes sense. Like, it's a movie that it's about the downfall of a relationship, and it talks about the kind of all the baggage that you bring into a relationship, from whether it's your home life when you're growing up or past relationships as well. It's a good movie. It has, like I said, a nice vibe to it. I always I don't know does that make sense to you as a genre, like a vibe movie?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's great. And Tyrone Tommy, he directed it. I think it might have been his first movie. Yeah, it was his first movie. And Olajide, he plays the main character in it. He plays the male in the relationship. He's great. He's really, really great in this. And I was pretty happy to see him get nominated, because it was, it's not a tough performance per se, because you're playing kind of a young man who's in the throes of growing up and heartbreak and all those kinds of things. But he does it so well, and he does it really well within the context of the film, and really plays to like the jazzy vibe of the movie, because there's a lot of music and a lot of jazz that's incorporated into the film. Rogelio Balatas, he won an award at South by Southwest for Islands. I believe
that's where you saw it too.
Yeah, I saw it at North by Northwest, South by Southwest. I saw it there, and I believe he won like Best Emerging Artist, maybe something like that. But Islands is about a middle-aged man who lives with his parents, and he's essentially the caretaker for his mother, who eventually passes away, and then he has to look after his father, whose health declines quite rapidly after his mom passes away. And it talks a bit about, I mean, the whole film is basically an exploration of a man who kind of didn't take life by the, what's a nicer way to say than by the balls? Like, he just didn't grab life. He didn't really embrace life in the way that maybe we think we need to. He was always just kind of the dutiful son who went to work, came home, and looked after his parents, but never really had a life of his own. And, there's moments of him being lonely, and but also moments of him, finding new relationships and friendships. And it's a movie that also talks about a lot about the Filipino experience outside of the Philippines. So there's a really, really moving scene actually that talks about there's a female who is his cousin, and she was working as a domestic worker in the Middle East. I believe it was Qatar that they named. And, it talks a bit about the experiences of those women and what they go through, because it can often be quite sad and quite traumatic for them. So it's a great movie that shows off a lot of Filipino culture, which is, we talk a lot about Asian cultures sometimes, but Filipinos kind of get shafted a little bit because they are Asians, but they're also Pacific Islanders. And sometimes I think they don't get as much shout outs as they should, because they have a very rich culture themselves. And Rogelio, he's very good in it. He's quite he's very quiet and he's very demure in it, but that's exactly what you want in the film. So yeah, he's great. And it's really cool to see he's older. And so it's nice to see somebody kind of later in life getting this kind of recognition in not just the Canadian screen, but, in the South by Southwest. And, the film's done pretty well across film festivals since last year.
Nice. Okay. Let's move over to actress, where we've seen two of the nominees. We'll sort of just start highlighting the ones that we really want to talk about here. And that's Ilia Kinani from Scarborough, who was the teacher. Interesting that she got Best Actress, considering I would put maybe one of the kids there, considering they considered Liam Diaz the lead actor. And I would say that she was definitely a supporting actress, supporting in this movie. And then the other one was El Magi Tailfeathers for Night Raiders, and she is the lead in that film. And it's interesting, she actually is nominated elsewhere in this because she directed a documentary that you saw that we'll end up talking a little bit later, called The Meaning of Empathy. So yeah, this I won't really talk about the Scarborough performance because it's very much supporting. I feel like that's in the wrong category, so I'm not too sure how it got there. But yeah, Night Raiders, it's a great performance by Tailfeathers as a mother who is trying to, the point of this movie is that all children have to go to state school, which is basically an allegory for residential school, because that was set up for Indigenous people, where their children were literally ripped from their homes and forced to go to school to be assimilated into white culture. And then once they were done school, they would hopefully have forgotten their entire history and language, family, all this sort of terrible things, and then they could join the white workforce, basically. So that's the metaphor that Night Raiders is going to, where it's not just Indigenous children who are being taken, but all children in general, sort of to show, hey, you know what? It would really suck if everyone lost their children, wouldn't it? This is what Indigenous people all had to go through and suffer through. So it's sort of this, maybe you need to think about it in the possibility of it being your own kid before you care, which is, total BS. But that's unfortunately the world that we live in. And so she plays this mother who is trying to protect her young daughter from being found by these sentient robots who find children and alert the police, who arrest the kids and put them into this prison school system, basically. And so she ends up losing her daughter, and then finds a group of Cree people who are breaking kids out and returning them to their homes, basically, which is also something that happened during the time of the residential school period. And so it's a very interesting sort of, typical sci-fi dystopian movie, but a very strong performance by a woman who is grieving the loss of her child and trying to understand what the world is, sort of thing.
More will come. Who lives here? The city went dark after the war. No one can see your face. No one.
Is that a child?
No, it's okay.
See? I was beginning to believe that my boy was the only free one left.
So moving on to some of the other ones, I'm very excited to talk about supporting actor because my boy Mark O'Brien for The Righteous was nominated for this. Very, very happy about this. You also have Joshua Ojic from Wildhood and Esteban Comalang from Islands. So I can't talk about the Islands performance, but I will talk about Mark O'Brien in The Righteous. Love this movie, and I am super disappointed it's not in basically every category. It should be in Best Picture, it should be in Best Direction, it should be Best Actor and Actress, all of this sort of stuff. And it only got a few nominations, and I'm very angry about that. You'll probably hear me praise this movie a lot more on a future episode, maybe the best movies of last year, which we still haven't done. But Mark O'Brien sort of plays this character of you don't really know if he's real or not. What's going on? Is he who he says he is? Is he a figment of imagination, of grief, of pain? Is he the devil himself? All this sort of stuff, which is very interesting on a script that he wrote in a movie that he directed. But I'm glad he got recognized for his performance.
So I didn't connect with The Righteous as much as you did. But like objectively speaking, it is a good movie, and I'm surprised that it didn't take up more space on this on the nominations. Like I thought it would be at least screenplay. I know we're going to get into cinematography because that should be, or production design, those technical ones. They should have been in there because it is a really well put together movie. But I'm happy for Mark O'Brien. Like I think he was very good in it. And we were just before we came on here, we were talking about him because evidently we just can't stop talking about Mark O'Brien these days. But it's just saying like he's been in so many things and he's had a lot of really big roles, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I'm with you on the justice for the righteous. That's actually very poetic. Good.
Do you have anything to say about the performance from Island or anything else in this category?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, Esteban, he plays the father, and he's very good. It's another one. It's one of those it's a very quiet performance. Like Islands as a whole is a very quiet movie, which is a nice contrast actually to Mark O'Brien's turn in The Righteous because he's much louder and more theatrical. I guess is that like a fair assessment of his performance? Whereas everybody kind of coming from the Islands, it's a very quiet film and very quiet performances, but they're very effective, which is so again happy to see them in there. Same with Joshua Ojic in Wildhood. He was very good.
Yes, I agree with that one too. He's the young Mi'kmaq boy who takes the main character under his wing, and they end up falling in love as well. So great performance there. Yeah, we'll kind of go through some of these other categories a bit quicker. We've got supporting actress. We've got Cherish Violet Blood in Scarborough, Kate Corbett in The Righteous, and Gail Maurice in Night Raiders. I'm a little surprised that Kate Corbett got nominated here, considering it's a very small one, and it could have been maybe Mimi Kuzik, who I was very disappointed didn't get nominated either in actress or supporting actress. But Cherish Violet Blood is one of the mothers in Scarborough, and she does a great job where we sort of see what the home life is like for someone who is maybe living below the poverty line and what they need to do to keep their family alive and safe. And that includes, trucking her disabled husband across the city to get doctor's appointments, to figuring out how to get food on the table, figuring out who she can borrow from, who she needs to help out, all this sort of stuff, who can help her take care of her kids, all this sort of stuff in the day-to-day life of someone who literally is like living day to day. So I think she does a great job with that role as well.
I really liked her in it. She shows a lot of the the frustration and struggles as well that a mom goes through, like any mother I think will go through. Like there's just moments in the day of you just don't want to put up with the shit from your kids. And I'm not a parent, but I can probably really relate to that. Like, I think any of us could. That is just so I think she did a nice job of showing a lot of different facets to her character, not just being, like you said, the living day-to-day thing. I mean, that's a very important part of her role in the film, but she also does a great job of just showing kind of the reality of being a mom and how difficult it can be.
Yes, I agree. Now we can kind of like go through if there's any specific nominations you want to give a shout out to. Obviously, in original screenplay, big shout out to The Righteous, Mark O'Brien getting that. You're going to hear me talk about this movie a lot in the next little while. One movie that I was a big fan of that barely got any nominations was All My Puny Sorrows, which got a nomination in art direction, production design, which is a little bit interesting for me, and a little disappointing that The Righteous didn't get nominated there as well.
Suffering is something that is passed on from one generation to the next, like flexibility, grace, or colorblindness.
How's the writing going?
Terrible. Do you think I've peaked? That I'm already on the downside of a largely forgettable career?
I see you haven't lost your flair for melodrama.
Oh, for you, all right.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yoli, your sister.
She tried to kill herself.
I really enjoyed All My Puny Sorrows. That was a very interesting one. A movie starring Alison Pill and Sarah Gaden as two sisters who are struggling with their family's history of depression and suicide in a very funny movie, which I would not say that if I was not serious, but yes, there is times that this movie is quite funny.
Do you think either of them should have gotten like an acting nomination? I know we haven't seen all of the nominations under the acting awards, but like were their performances kind of award worthy, I suppose?
Oh, 100%. I was definitely surprised by Alison Pill. I've liked her in several other things, but I've never seen her be a lead and be such a commanding lead. But okay. You really could have picked, half a dozen performances in All My Puny Sorrows, because it is a bit of an ensemble movie, and that sort of leads into casting, where this movie did get nominated for casting, which is interesting. So the person nominated for casting is the casting director, which, reflects who they end up bringing in. So it's almost basically like a best ensemble award, sort of like SAG gives out, I would sort of relate it to. And I would agree, it's got a very, very strong ensemble cast, so I'm very proud of it. I'm also proud that Scarborough got nominated for casting as well, because that's also quite a big ensemble cast.
And a difficult movie to cast as well. Like I mentioned it briefly, but when you have your film rests on 3 child actors, that's quite a hefty burden to place on them, or hefty responsibility to place on them, because like they're kids. So, no matter how good they are, they're still children. And I don't think it wasn't an easy film to cast, and they did a very, very good job of it. And I also want to shout out the Canadian Screen Awards for even having a casting category. I think that it's a category very much so worth shining a spotlight on. And while the American counterparts down in Hollywood are removing certain ones from their telecast, I think it's cool that like Canadian Screen Awards recognizes certain categories that aren't always celebrated.
Are there any other categories you sort of want to give a shout out to?
There was one movie that I really enjoyed that I watched at the Canadian Film Fest last year, and that's Between Waves. And it is a science fiction. I don't really know how to describe the movie. It's a science fiction psychological thriller. It's about a woman who lost her partner. It's directed by Virginia Abramovich, and it's fantastic. I really enjoyed it. Like, if you like sci-fi, I think it's a really cool movie to kind of dig into. And it got nominated for original score. And I thought that was really cool, because the score in it is really, really impactful, and it really elevates the rest of the movie. Which I think that sometimes in science fiction movies, you really need a good score to just kind of ground, I guess, more high-end themes that aren't necessarily in our reality. So I thought that was really cool. They got nominated. I would have liked to see them get nominated for something like cinematography as well, maybe, and like maybe production design too, because I thought that was very worthwhile. And then another one that you mentioned, which was the feature-length documentary category, and that is The Meaning of Empathy. And that is, for anybody who hasn't seen it, and I've been telling you to see it too, it's amazing. It's such a good documentary. It is about, so Tailfeather, she's from the Blackfoot community in southern Alberta in the Kenai First Nation. And it talks about the substance abuse problem within that community and what they're trying to do to get, especially the youth, but obviously everyone's included, to get everybody kind of on the more straight and narrow. And it's a heartbreaking documentary, and it really goes in depth about how substance abuse can not just affect individuals, but their families and the community at large. She does an amazing job putting that documentary together. So in my opinion, that is probably the surest win that I could see in the Canadian screen, because I really think it's a documentary that it's probably one of the best docs that I've seen in a really long time, to be honest. And it's pretty amazing. So I would highly recommend, getting your paws on that one, because it's a really good one.
Nice. And speaking of that, movie nominated in a few categories, Paw Patrol the Movie.
You know what? I always forget that that's Canadian. And I won't lie to you. So I think it was because Paw Patrol, it came out, last fall or something like that. And I got an email about it, and they said something about Canada's greatest export. And I was like, what the hell are they talking about? And I looked it up and I went, oh shit, yeah, Paw Patrol's Canadian. Something I did know, but I love that that's Canadian, because I think that it's such a, it's a cute show and movie for kids. And I don't know any of my friends whose kids don't love it. So they must be doing something right. Paw Patrol too. Good for them.
Of course. Yeah. I think that's kind of a good overview. We didn't talk about every nomination or category. It's going to be a lot of repeating of the same sort of stuff. Some of the most nominated films were Scarborough and Night Raiders. Both had 11 nominations. They led the pack. All My Puny Sorrows had 8. Drunken Birds had 6. So did Wildhood. The Righteous had 3, Islands had 3, The Meaning of Empathy had 3, and Night of the Kings had 2. I didn't include all these movies. Those were just sort of the ones that I picked and chose. Obviously, Scarborough Night Raiders did have the most out of everyone, so that is notable. But yeah, those were most of the big movies, and I think we did a pretty good job of seeing the best that Canadian film had to offer this past year. And I'm really proud overall of what was being produced, and I can't wait to sort of see what's coming up this year. We love going to film festivals, and it's a great place to watch this stuff. And unfortunately, if you miss it, it's kind of a little bit tricky unless you're knowing what to look up on the iTunes store. Yeah. Some of these movies are hard to find. They don't really always show up on Netflix. They don't show up on Crave. You might get lucky and they'll show up on CBC Gem or something like that. But that's about it, really. They'll have a limited theatrical release where they'll be in, the 15 biggest Canadian cities, and they'll play for 2 weeks, and that's about it.
I mean, I'll say even Scarborough, it's been a pretty big movie in Canada this year, and it played at Morningside on the 25th, TIFF Lightbox, I think just on the 25th, and then I think a few other places around Canada as well. Sorry, I don't know all of Canada. Obviously, Toronto is the only important city in this country, isn't it? But I know that they're also doing some screenings. I saw Saskatchewan has a screening on March 11th. But the point is, even a movie as big as Scarborough, that's not even getting 2 weeks. It's just getting a single day to show at TIFF Lightbox. Not everybody can get to TIFF Lightbox, so it is a bit of a shame that it is a blinker, you'll miss it kind of thing. And that's why I was saying the streaming service that they had proposed initially, that could have been such a good outlet and a good platform for these kinds of movies, to just throw them on there and have people watch them. And I mean, Cineplex is the one doing a lot of those screenings anyways, so yeah, it would have been really nice, but c'est la vie. What are you gonna do? Yeah,
for sure. But we're going to go back to Oscar coverage next week, in the next few weeks, actually. But you can, I hope people check out some of these movies that we talked about. It'll be really nice. I'd love to hear some feedback if you've seen any of these already. Rachel, what have you been working on, and where can people follow you?
Before I answer that, other than The Righteous, did you have a favorite of all of the kind of the Canadian films that you saw? I know you did the list, but of the ones that were nominated? minus
if
The
you
Righteous.
check out my list that I'll link in the show notes of my top 5 Canadian films of the year, all of them were nominated for the Canadian Screen Awards, which is a huge plus. I would probably say The Righteous was my favorite. After that, probably All My Puny Sorrows, and then Scarborough would be my top 3.
Nice. I think I would go Night of the Kings, Wildhood, Scarborough. I think those would probably be my 3. Yeah, I really like those. In terms of what I'm up to, speaking of Canadian stuff, go check out LOL Canada. Last One Laughing? Yeah. Last One Laughing Canada on Amazon Prime. I did a review for that for Exclaim, but just in general, go and watch that show because it's quite funny and people seem to be really funny.
I've watched the first 2 episodes and I cry laughing when I'm watching it.
I think the next 2 already came out this week, didn't they?
I'm behind.
Because they're doing drops every week, which is pretty cool and goes against what I said in my review. Because I'll throw up and say that I was wrong in my review, but I was wrong. I kind of thought the show started a little slow, and it did for me. I guess I'm not wrong. In my opinion, it did. But everybody seems to be really on board with it. So I love that. So there's that. And I did an interview with a Canadian folk singer, Kaya Cater, and she did the music for a new CBC show called The Porter, which is on Mondays on CBC. And then it shows on CBC Gem after that. And that's a worthwhile TV show to check out as well. But I really enjoyed talking with Kaya, and we had, and I'm pretty happy with the way the piece turned out. So that is on Exclaim as well. And I'm going to plug one more piece, which is friend of the show, Bill Antonio. He does monthly Criterion Channel kind of wrap-ups of different collections that they have. And this past month, in celebration of Black History Month, he chose to focus on Harry Belafonte's movies. So I wrote a couple things in there. But yeah, check all of those ones out because he does a really great job of pulling together a lot of because there's a lot of stuff on Criterion, so he does a great job of kind of streamlining and focusing on different collections.
Bill, this is the only time we're going to compliment you on the show.
I will always compliment you, Bill. Don't worry. I got your back.
Damn it, Bill. I really like you too, and you're a great writer too and movie critic. It just pains me to compliment you. But you can follow this show on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at contrazoompod. And if you've seen any Canadian films this past year, whether they got nominated for the Canadian Screen Awards or not, let us know your thoughts on your favorites. Send an email to contrazoompod@gmail.com. Thank you to Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music and to Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. If you like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, we do post all episodes there too. Thanks for checking us out.